Good morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar to introduce the 2016 census with some practical ways for you to start making use of this valuable resource. I'd like to thank the National Retail Association for their collaboration and support with getting this webinar organised today. My name is Peter Cohen and I look after Navigate's census-based products, including MarketMap, which we'll get to a bit later. Our presenter today is Bob Schwartz. Bob is an economic and strategy consultant with over 20 years of experience advising some of Australia's most recognised retail and consumer-oriented organisations, as well as government agencies. He specialises in strategy, network and asset planning, economic forecasting, and analysing and interpreting complex data. So, without further delay, I shall hand over the proceedings to Bob.
Thanks, Peter. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bob Schwartz, and may as well just get started straight away talking about what's in it for you about the Census 2016, and as Peter mentioned, how you can best access this really valuable data source. So where we're going, what is the census? We're going to assume that a lot of you might not be familiar with everything, so we'll go through some things. The question that a lot of people ask, of course, is it accurate enough? Is it good to use? What's new with the census? And then what the census can really tell us, and as part of that, go through a case study area to just really dig deep a little bit, I suppose, to give you an understanding of the richness of the data. And most importantly, it's not so much how rich the data is, but what that means for small retailers, small businesses, large retailers. The very largest retailers, the best ones in the country, use this as their prime source. Without question, the census is the best data source in Australia, bar none. Everyone from a sole operator up to and including the Commonwealth Government, Woolworths, Coles, Wesfarmers, uses the census data and uses census data intensively. I should mention quickly what the difference is between a census and a survey. There are about 24.5 million of us in the country, and a survey will look maybe 5,000, so if we're lucky, about 2% of us. And to be able to then take that 5,000 and grow it out to talk about us is what a survey does. But you know that if we're only looking at 5,000 people, we're going to miss some situations. We're going to miss a lot of things. So a census, though, is asking us about us. It is truly looking at each of us individually, as families, as households, asking us the questions, collating it, and giving it back. It's why you cannot buy a better data set. And even though the large companies spend millions of dollars, it doesn't get better than this. And oftentimes what they purchase is simply repackaging the census. It gives us a snapshot of where we are today, but also, as you'll see, it gives us an idea as to where we've come over the last 10 years. And while it is focused on where we live, and that address that you filled in for the census is how the AEST organizes its data, there is a data set that's coming later in the year that looks at organizing us by the place of where we work. Is it accurate? The simple answer, yes, definitely. The AEST did commission a survey due to the unusual nature, shall we say, of how the census was collected this year. And what they found was that certainly working at a high level, census data is both safe and accurate. We've found that the non-response rates, while they're increasing, they're in line with trends, both what we've seen here and overseas. So look, I can say hand over heart, it's safe to use and it's accurate. And if we do find some anomalies, we're going to start picking that up with the available data that we've had in 06 and 11. So we'll see, look, does the trend look right? So we'll be able to come up with this. So what's new? Well, the biggest thing, I suppose, is that there are more geographies. The census data comes out in prepackaged boundaries that the AEST has devised. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But in areas that are fast growing, those that in 2011 might have just been a paddock are now filled with houses. In 2011, we would have had this prepackaged boundary be pretty big in those areas. Now, these AEST boundaries are much smaller, so you can get down to a neighborhood level and understand what's going on. Also, there's a lot more data that's available in the basic release, and as much as I'm going to try to give you a flavor of detail, this is something that we really don't need to talk about. So what can it tell me? Well, things you probably know about: number of people, the income by family, by household, by individual, where we were born, where our parents were born, how long we've been in Australia. In case you couldn't tell from my accent, I'm one of those that has not been a person born in Australia. So you'll get to find out more about me. Things you might know: how much we pay in rent and mortgage. We can look at both the median amount that we pay. We can also see how many people are paying rent and paying mortgage repayments in certain categories. The types of dwellings that we're in. Is it a caravan? Is it a detached house? Are we couple families or lone person households? You might not know that, again, we have this time series of not just a few things, but just about all key economic and demographic data sets. Really powerful. And also we come up with something on unoccupied private dwellings, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And then there are things from all of this that we can calculate very easily. You don't need much. We can understand about housing stress and which areas are ripe for redevelopment. And again, I'll talk about that in a little while. So instead of really talking, I suppose, let me show you some of what the census has to offer, but also how you can access it. And there are several different ways that that's going to be possible. When you go to the AEST website, so it's aes.gov.au, you will see on its homepage the banner that's at the top there, and you'll click on Census. That banner that's there is on all their pages. And when you click on Census, this is the landing page that you come to. And at the top left, there's the data by geography. Now, the quick stats search is something that we'll come back to, and I think you may find very useful. But for the moment, for completeness, I want to look at advanced search. And when you click on advanced search, you see this page. And this starts to give you ways to start approaching the census. And you'll see this text box on the left, the geography search. The AEST has these prepackaged boundaries, as I've mentioned. There are a lot of them. You can search by suburb. You can search by postal area, which is the AEST's way of trying to come up with the postcodes. You can do by Commonwealth electoral divisions. But you can also look at local government areas. You could then start to see collection of suburbs or parts of states or whole states. There are a lot of really cool things that you can do. And on this next one, what I did is I typed in the word Bendigo. And when you type in the word Bendigo in the text search, you will get a list, a drop-down menu of every geography that has the word Bendigo in it. Now, I happen to know that I wanted to get this area, which you see on the map here, which is Statistical Area Level 2 Geography Boundary, which they spent a lot of time on the creativity here coming up with that name. But effectively, an SA2 is a collection of suburbs. The diameter here is maybe about 3K, so it's not massive. It's not, the diameter is not standard, but what is standard, it's a collection of suburbs that make some sense. So this is the Bendigo CBD and the inner suburbs to the north and northwest. Now, from there, after typing in your text search, you have a choice at the bottom of a community profile or the quick stats. Now, I'm going to look at the quick stats later. So clicking on the community profile gives you this landing page. Again, the map is there, and right now there are 3 profiles that you can access. The first is the general community profile. This is basic standard census data for all of us. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander profile is, as you might think, if in your census form you have ticked that you are of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent, then this profile only looks at those people. It isolates those people that have self-selected and talks about them. And then finally you get the time series profile, which I've talked about. And the time series profile is one of the things I'm going to take a look at. And as I've mentioned, it goes back 10 years. It's the 2006 census and the 2011 census and the current census. So it is a fabulous way to get a sense of the current state of play and where and why we are where we are, how our community has changed. Now, I should mention here that using the time series profile is not your first port of call. The time series profile is for people who have used, say, the quick stats and really want to get into the guts. When you click on those, you will get an Excel workbook with lots of spreadsheets. You're going to get the full data dump. What I'm going to show you are the things that once you get comfortable, and it's going to take a while, once you get comfortable, you'll be able to pull out some very interesting, good things from there and really help your business and help your business grow. But by showing you what's possible and kind of the end game, I think it'll make it easier for you. So when you take your first step with the quick stats or MarketMap, you'll be able to understand where you want to go and to frame the questions that you're interested in. So here's a selection of things that I've pulled off. And I'm going to start looking solely at housing because housing is such an important component of retail. It is by far the #1 driver of total retail spending. More with non-food, but it is also a very important part of food spending. And within this area of Bendigo, one of the things we can start to see is we've seen an absolute decline in the number of couple families with kids. If you are a business that has a component looking of selling to school kids or their families, you'll see that your market is falling. It'll also show, look, what is the average monthly income for couple families? And from 2006 to 2011 grew very strongly, but the rate of growth halved from 11 to 16. So we're seeing a lot of friction in the growth of incomes of couple families. Mortgage repayments have equally, not just equally kept up, exceeded the growth in income between 06 and 11, so that the ratio, the housing stress of couple families with mortgages went from 16.9% of their income going to mortgages to 18% in 2011. So that figure of 1443 in 2011 is 18% of the just over $8,000 in average monthly income. It's not ridiculous. It means that they're not under severe stress by any stretch of the imagination. But what it showed is that as we moved from 06 to 11, we saw that a couple families were taking on more and more debt, which does put them under a bit of psychological stress. What we see by 2016 is that the ratio has fallen because interest rates have fallen nicely from 2011 to 2016. But because income is not rising very quickly and interest rates are rising and will continue to rise, we know that the mortgage stress that couple families are under is increasing. So for your business, that could mean any number of things. It means that value products are going to be much more in demand. It could start to explain why people are downsizing from top quality products with commensurate price points down to mid-level and low-level price points. It could be the understanding to realize that people are just window shopping rather than actually buying. It's this sort of context to your business and the context to the area in which your customers are living starts to put the intuition that you have for your business and give it some reason and start understanding why it is you're seeing what you're doing. So you're not just flying blind. You'll be able to really take charge of how you need to grow your business and adapt your business to the current conditions. This next chart looks at the type of housing, and it looks like at the by tenancy. So we know that in 2016, 29% of private dwellings were owned outright, 26% were owned with a mortgage, 44% were rented. So you can see how this community is changing. It's moving from having real security of tenure. In 2006, 60% of private dwellings were owner-occupied, but now this has fallen to just over 55%. And so it's the growth of renters. And renters, because they don't have security of tenancy and because they have less attachment to their particular area, spend less on retail. That's both non-food and food as well. What they do tend to have is a higher preference for services. Do it for me, travel, eating out, a large variety of things. So as this community is changing, and this for demographics is a very rapid change. This is why your business needs to be nimble enough to understand the change that's going on in this neighborhood in order to better reflect the demands and the needs of your customers. The census can also tell us a bit of the type of house. So detached houses, townhouses, semi-detached, flats, and apartments. And here we see the rise in rental has coincided with a rise in semi-detached. Semi-detached houses certainly have less space than detached houses. They'll have fewer bedrooms. They have fewer land area. So again, if you're selling hardware, for example, there's less need for paint, there's less need for garden, there's less need for outdoor furniture. There's a whole lot less that can be fitted into a townhouse than into a 3 or 4 bedroom detached house. So this reinforces the need for services, and probably services outside the home rather than necessarily inside the home. Now, this one, what I want to take a look at is, I think is fascinating. And what this tells us is the percentage of detached houses that have one person in them. So looking at semi-detached and townhouses, 61.6% of all townhouses in 2016 were occupied by one person. So not only do semi-detached houses need fewer things, goods, when you have one person in them, again, there's less need to stock that because it's just you. And in this case, you probably do spend less on food. So this affects all retail spending, all services, and you're more likely to be outside of the home for so much of the time. And also it tends to suggest as well that if we're looking at this area of huge growth in townhouses, that, well, it's populated mainly by one person, so you can't just take, well, average household sizes 2 and a bit. No, now we're getting the vast majority is just 1. So while you take a look in a neighborhood and see all this construction, we don't necessarily get all these people. And so it's about right-sizing the business in order to appropriately handle the type of people that are there. The other thing I mentioned earlier was which area is ripe for redevelopment. And the figure about detached houses I find fascinating. Maybe it's just me, and I grant you that. But with detached houses, as we see, close to 1/3 of detached houses have one person in them. It is my feeling, and I've seen this over the years, but I have to say it's more of a bias than anything I can point to. It is my feeling that when I see a lone person in a household, they're more likely the last person in the household rather than the first. Now this gets backed up by a couple of things. I happen to know in Bendigo that the median age is 40, which is about 3 or 4 years older than the national average. So we're skewing older anyway. I also know that the average number of bedrooms of a detached house is about 3 to 4. So one person who was probably older, rattling around in a larger house, is a candidate to have that house when it's sold, and it'll probably be sooner rather than later, as a candidate for redevelopment. So these are the things that you can start looking at and start looking to using the current snapshot as a way to assess the future and to start understanding how that might change. Now the quick stats is simply, as it suggests, is a quick statistical snapshot of what they're currently. It's benchmarked, it's only 2016, and it's a great place to start. As I said, the time series and the Excel spreadsheets, they're rich, they're fabulous, they've got tons of great data in there. And I just wanted to give you a flavor of where you could head, but the quick stats is probably one of the best places to start because it's free, it's there, and it gives you all kinds of really good things to know about. So back to the page there, instead of clicking on community profile, let's click on quick stats. You may remember the census landing page, and you can go straight there by typing in Bendigo, and again, from the menu, from the drop-down menu, getting there the same. And when you get there, the initial thing that you see is this front page here. Now the quick stats is not anything to download, though you can copy it. It is simply on a page that you start scrolling down. So there's plenty below this, and I'm just going to highlight a few things beyond here. But again, you can see we have the map of the geography. We know how many people, we know the ratio of male to female. Just up front, you start getting a sense of who we are and where we are. So another thing that we can see from the quick stats, which I find really interesting, is marital status. Because in this area, the number of people from the top there who identify themselves as married at 36% is well below the Victorian average and well below the Australian average. We find that never marrieds are higher and divorced are higher. And when we separate the married into registered, de facto, and not married, again, registered marriages much lower, and the single people are taking over. So again, this starts to give you that flavor that we've seen earlier. Same thing, that if you're selling school supplies, and we're looking at selling with a lot of small kids, this probably isn't the area for you. If you're looking at services, food and beverage, do it for me, this might then be an area of expansion for you, or ways to start thinking about how you can tap into that sort of service mentality. Now, the other thing that's in the quick stats is this unoccupied private dwellings that I mentioned earlier. So we know that we have a lot of townhouses being built at the expense of flats. But what we also see here is that of all of these private dwellings, 14%, much higher than the Victorian average, much higher than the national average, are empty. On census night, no one was occupying them. So when you take a look again at seeing all this construction, and you're expecting, well, we're going to get 2, 3 people in there, no. When they're occupied, those new townhouses, if they're occupied, they generally have one person. But there's also a reasonable chance that they're not going to be occupied at all. So it's a way to start understanding, look, I can see from the outside that the architecture is changing, but what's going on the inside? So these are just some of the things that you can start to address, and I would highly recommend that when you approach the census, it is from an approach about what question do you want to answer? What is it that you've seen in your business that is kind of puzzling? And we can start looking for those answers. Because the census itself, to know that there's 959 unoccupied private dwellings, creates either a huge yawn or a big so what if you just look at that number in isolation. But if you're coming to it by trying to understand, look, is there increased market share for me to be had in this new development? Then the 14% unoccupied starts to say powerful things to you as to how to organize your business. Another way that we can take a look at how to access census data is through MarketMap. And I'll just very briefly go through this. This is something that our friends at the NRA have been very generous with, and we really appreciate the partnership here in allowing us to show you this. With the census, you have to use their preset boundaries. With MarketMap, you tell us the place, the address that you're interested in, and you create your own catchment. This is again in Bendigo, and I've tried to recreate that Bendigo map that we saw from the census. And so this radius is about 1.75 kilometers. You'll notice that it's not a straight circle because it just captures the full micro boundaries that are available to us from the census. But we also start getting some different maps. And this one just happens to be a heat map on residential population. So we can start to see where the key centers of population are, or if it's just fairly well spread out. And as you can see, there's one particular area that has higher density than the others. Another map that is not part of the census at all is about daytime population. Daytime population measures all the people in an area who live, who work, and more importantly, visit. It is a number that's designed to give you an idea of the number of retail contestable people in an area during the day or during the business hours of whatever that is. In this case, it's no surprise to see that maximum density is in the Bendigo CBD, and that it kind of flows in a northwesterly direction from there. But by looking at this on the map, it's a great way to start understanding a number without actually having to look at a number. One other map that's in there is just giving you an idea within the catchment where the car parking and supermarkets. And the reason why this is really important, even if you're a retailer, a fashion retailer, is that supermarkets are great markers of where the retail areas are located. And equally, if there are car parks around, you also get a sense of what's available for people to go to an area and to stay there. So this starts to give you an idea within your catchment, where are other nodes of retail and where are others located. Other maps, as you can see on the side there, show where the food catering outlets are, hardware stores, and pharmacies. So a market map looks very much like a quick stats, really. The difference is in the second line under attributes is the daytime population. That's ours. All of this data is census-based. We will update it every year because we do update our population every year, and so we're able to update the ratios a bit. So this is just a nice, quick way of accessing the same sort of things that are in quick stats, but here in one form, and we've kind of cherry-picked the data that we think is most important for you. What MarketMap also has that the census doesn't, besides daytime population, is spending. So this is total expenditure. The first column is, as it says, total expenditure on 14 main categories of consumption, of expenditure, the average household spend, and the ratio of that spend to total expenditure. So, for example, transportation makes up 12% of total household expenditure within the Bendigo region. And then on the other side, we see that that translates into figures that are measured against non-metro Victoria, state of Victoria, and Australia. We also have down below some aggregations, both of household income, so you can do a measure of how much medical and healthcare is as a percentage of income. All of these categories can be broken down further, and some are within the MarketMap product, but also if you really want to get down and dirty, that's also something that is quite possible to get a very small market as well. So let me just wrap it up here. We know that data is important. You've heard that for years, and I'm just going to reinforce that in this first one. It helps you with the banks. It helps you put together your business plan. It helps you get a government grant. It helps you adjust marketing. Now, you've heard that data is important, but please, please don't be put off by this tsunami of things. I'm very comfortable with this data, so I make it sound like, oh, it's a breeze. 1, 2, 3, that's all you have to do. It's not easy. It's really hard to know where to start. What do I do? What we've tried to do with this session is just whet your appetite to give you an understanding of how large retailers analyze their customers, how they work with their locations. The data that you have seen here, what's available from the census, what's available in MarketMap, is the universe of data that large retailers use. That's it. There's no magic here. And they're able to do fancy things with the data, mostly because they have the ability to have someone like me or hire someone like me to work with the data. Please, it is worth your while to explore the census. You will find that to be very valuable. But again, as I mentioned earlier, come to it with a specific question to ask. What is it that you really want to know? What are you finding? Do you want to know about, look, is what I'm offering, if I expect to get $1,000 a year out of my good customers, what's the percentage that is of income, and is that reasonable? If that's my goal, how do I get there? And if we find that the income is available, great, but we may find that healthcare and fuel are squeezing that goal. And so this just allows you to start understanding how your goals mesh with what is out there in the community. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and you don't have to do it now. We're available. We're here, and we would like to help you. And that's why we've partnered with the NRA, is because we're here to help. We think we have a good product, but we are here to help and to navigate this absolute tsunami of data. Look, I want to thank you so much for your attention and the use of your ears, and let me throw it back to Peter now.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob, and thanks everybody. If that's piqued your interest, I encourage you to take a look at the ABS website as well as the MarketMap website, which is marketmap.biz. Take a look around and have a register there so you can have a play with the report builder. There's no need to spend anything really until you're happy with the report you've designed. Also, there's a contact page to send us any questions. And so if you've got any questions from this, or if you're listening to this as a recording, go there, send us some questions, and we'll see if we can answer them for you. So, with that, I'll close today's webinar. Thank you very much for your attention.